Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I'm Nur Fatikhah Hakim and my student number is 2019-081-0072. Now, we will present about assessing reading. Introduction. Visual and auditory media have rapidly evolved with the continuing technological boom. The written word continues to play an important role in educating, entertaining, and amusing us. Reading is also an ability that teachers expect students to develop while studying a foreign language. Reading is similar to listening in that it is impossible to see the mechanism or observe a particular outcome. There are three genres of reading. First, academic reading. For the examples, professional journal articles, essays, papers, and others. Second, job-related reading. For the examples, message letters, emails, and others. Third, personal reading. For the examples, novels, forms, questionnaires, texts, notes, and others. The micro and macro skills that I will mention reflect the range of possible reading comprehension assessment objectives. Micro skill. First, distinguish distinct graphemes and orthographic patterns in English. Second, recall chunks of language of various lengths in short-term memory. Third, write at fast enough pace to satisfy the needs of the missions. 4. Recognize a core of word and determine the meaning of word order patterns. 5. Understand grammatical word classes, systems, and patterns, laws, and elliptical forms. 6. Consider that different grammatical forms can convey the same meaning. 7. Recognize the role of coherent device in written discourse in signaling relationship between and among clauses. Next, macro skills. First, recognize written discourses, rhetorical conventions, and their importance for interpretations. Second, recognize the roles of written text in terms of communications. Third, activate schemata to infer meaning that isn't clear. 4. Infer similarities and correlations between events, deduce causes and effects, and so on. 4. Distinguish between literal and implied meanings. 5. 6. Identify and understand culturally specific references. 7. Build and use a battery of reading strategies to understand a text. Some principal strategies for reading comprehensions. First, identify your purpose in reading text. Second, for bottom-up encoding, use spelling rules and conventions. Third, to evaluate meaning, use lexical analysis. Fourth, when you are not sure what something means, make a quest. Fifth, skim the text for the key points and keys. 7. To speed up the process, use silent reading techniques. 6. Look for relevant details in the text. Then, next, to understand and retain details, use magical notes. 9. Distinguish between literal and implied meanings. 10. To process relationships, use discourse markers. Tips of reading. There are 4 tips of reading. First, perspective. Perspective reading tasks involve attending to the components of larger strands of discourse. Second, selective. This category is largely an artifact of assessment formats. Third, interactive. Interactive reading is reading in which the reader must interact with a text, a psycholinguistic sense. Fourth, extensive. Extensive reading can include professional articles, essays, technical reports, short stories, and books.
My name is Putri Anggraeni, and now I will explain about designing assessment text, perceptive reading. The first is reading aloud. The test taker sees separate letters, words, and/or short sentences and reads them aloud one by one in the presence of an administrator. Because the assessment is of reading comprehension, any recognizable oral approximation of the target response is considered correct. The second is written response. The test taker's task is to reproduce the prop in writing. Because of the transfer across different skills here, the test taker's response must be evaluated carefully. The third is multiple choice. Multiple choice responses are not only a matter of choosing one of 4 or 5 possible answers. Other formats, some of which are especially useful at the low levels of reading, include same or different, circle the answer, true or false, choose the letter, and matching. The last one is picture code items. The test takers are shown a picture along with the written text and are given one of a number of possible tasks to perform. With the same picture, the test taker might read sentences and then point to the correct part of the picture. And the next part is designing assessment text selective reading. This category includes what many incorrectly think of as testing vocabulary and grammar. How many textbooks provide little tests and quizzes labeled vocabulary and grammar and never feature any other skill besides reading. Lexical and grammatical aspects of language are simply the forms that used to perform all 4 of the skills of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The first is multiple choice for form-focused criteria. By far the most popular method of testing or reading knowledge of vocabulary and grammar is the multiple choice format, mainly for reasons of practicality. It is easy to administer and can be scored quickly. And the most straightforward multiple choice items may have little context but might serve as a vocabulary or grammar check.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, my name is Suriati. Here I want to talk about designing assessment tasks, selective reading. Matching tasks. At this level of selective reading, the test taker's job is simply to respond right, which keeps the match in the right format. The most frequently, the criterion that appears in the matching procedure is vocabulary. The following is an example of a suitable assignment. In this example, participants are asked to match exciting vocabulary. The matching task also has the advantage of offering an alternative to the traditional one, empty, and sometimes easier to create multiple choice formatting or filling of multiple choice items. But there are some drawbacks to the matching task. They can be more of a riddle solving process or a guessing game than a real task understanding as the test taker struggles with finding a match. Perhaps between 10 or 20 different items, like the other assignment in this section, there are contrast to exercises that are endemic to academic and rarely found in the real world. Next is editing tasks. Editing tasks or rhetorical errors is a test method used to assess linguistic competence in reading. This technique focuses not only on grammar but also introducing original editing tasks, or see errors at writing part. Here is a set of examples of editing tasks. Next, picture code text. In picture code text, the test taker reads a series of sentences of the definition, respectively describe the label portion of the image or diagram. Their job is to identify each one label items. In the following diagram, the test taker doesn't have to know every area, but by reading the definition, they can make an identification. As example, here. Next is gap filling tasks. In gap filling tasks, assignments are given to students to fill in the blanks. In this case, students fill an item based on words or phrases. As seen in the following example, the obvious disadvantage of this type of task is its questionable judgment or reading skills. The task requires reading and writing performance, thus making it allow validity in isolating readings as the only criterion. Next is design and assessment tasks, interactive reading. Cloze text. The cloze test is an exercise test or assessment consisting of a portion of text with certain words omitted, in which participants are asked to replace the missing words. The cloze test requires the ability to understand context and vocabulary to identify the correct word or type of word that is included in the deleted part of the text. This exercise is usually given for the assessment of learning and teaching mother tongue and second language. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Dafa atau Febrian. Here I would like to present about designing assessment tests in interactive reading. The first one is import to reading plus comprehension question. Many standardized tests continue to use the technique of an impromptu reading followed by question, which students around the world have come to expect. Assessing reading in a discussion on standardized testing in Chapter 5, we look at a typical reading comprehension passage and a set of questions from the International English Language Testing Systems. Notice that this set of questions based on 250-word passage covers the comprehension of these features. The first one is main idea or topic, and then expression or idioms of praise in context, invention implied detail, grammatical features, detail, scanning for a specifically stated detail, excluding facts not written, and then supporting idea, and the last one, vocabulary in context. This specification and the question that exemplify them are not just a string of straight comprehension questions that follow the thread of passage. The second one is short answer test. Question might assess the same abilities indicated above in the reading comprehension passage, but be worded in open-ended question form and not multiple choice. For example, in a passage on the future of airline travel, the following question might appear. This rather predictable disadvantage may be outweighed by the fast validity of offering students a chance to construct their own answers and by the westback effect of potential follow-up discussion. And the third one is editing or longer text. The likelihood that students in English classroom will read connected prose of a page or two is greater than the likelihood that they will encounter the contrived format of uncounted sentence. Third, if the test designer can draw up specification for a number of grammatical and rhetorical categories that match the content of the course. For a total of 32 to 56 items in his editing test, was able to offer teacher a computer-generated breakdown of performance in the following categories. The first one is sentence structure, verb tense, noun or article features, modal auxiliaries, verb complements, adjective, and passives. These categories were selected for inclusion from a survey of instruction, syllabus in writing courses, and providing workshops. The last one is scanning. Scanning is a strategy used by all readers to find relevant information in a text. Assessment of scanning is carried out by presenting test takers with text. And then the last is sequencing. One way is to ask them to create a story using what's often referred to as the strip story techniques.
Okay, my name is Allanis Clarissa. I will continue the presentation. Information transfer, reading charts, maps, graphs, and diagrams. Every educated person must be able to comprehend charts, maps, graphs, calendars, diagrams, and the like. Converting such non-verbal input into comprehensible intake requires not only understanding of the graphic and verbal conventions of the medium, but also a linguistic ability to interpret that information to someone else. For example, reading a map implies understanding the conventions of map graphics, but it is often accompanied by telling someone where to turn, how far to go, and so on. Another example, scanning a menu requires an ability to understand the structure of most menus and the capacity to order when the time comes. All of these media presuppose the reader's appropriate schema for interpreting them and often are accompanied by oral and discourse to clarify, question, argue, and debate, among other linguistic functions. So to comprehend information in this medium, learner must be able to, first, comprehend the specific conventions of the various types of graphics. The second one, comprehend labels, headings, number, and symbols. And the third one, comprehend the possible relation among elements of the graphic. And the last one, make inferences that are not presented overtly. The act of comprehending graphic includes the linguistic performance of oral or written interpretations, comment, question, and so on. There are tasks for assessing interpretations of graphic information. The first one is read a graphic. It's about answer simple, direct information questions. And the second one, reading a graphic, is is about describe or elaborate on information. And the third one, read a graphic, is infer or predict information. And the fourth, read a passage, is about choose the correct graphic for it. And the fifth, read a passage with an accompanying graphic and interpret both. The sixth one and the last one, read a passage, create or use a graphic to illustrate. Okay, the next explanation is about designing assessment tasks, extensive reading. So there are many complications about assessing extensive reading. The first one is extensive reading involves somewhat longer texts such as journal articles, technical reports, longer essays, short stories, and books than we have been dealing with up to this point. And the second one is reading this type of discourse almost always involves a focus on meaning using mostly top-down processing with only occasional use of a targeted bottom-up strategy. And the third one is formal assessment is not likely to be contained within the time constraints of a typical formal testing framework. And then the last one is the expected response from the reader is likely to involve as much written or sometimes oral performance as reading. And in the previous slide, the presenter already explained about some task applications. And in this part, there will also some task applications that are unique to extensive reading. There are skimming, summarizing, responding to reading, and also note-taking. Okay, the first one is skimming task. So skimming is the process of rapidly covering reading matter to determine its useful main idea. And it is a prediction strategy used to give a reader a sense of a topic and purpose of a text, the organization of a text, the perspective or point of view of a writer, its ease or difficulty, and its usefulness to the reader. And there are some example questions that students usually answer. For example, what is the main idea of a text? What is the author's purpose of the text? And there's so many examples question for the skimming test. Okay, the second one is summarizing and responding. One of the most common means of assessing extensive reading is to ask the students to write a summary of the text. Summarizing requires a synopsis or overview of the text, and the task given to the students can be very simply worded. And this is the example of direction for summarizing. And there is also criteria for assessing a summary. Among the 4 points, the first one is the first one is the only that can be considered as a reading performance, and the other three are can be considered as the writing performance. Of further interest in assessing extensive reading is the technique of asking a student to respond to a text. Responding asks the reader to provide his or her own opinion on the text as a whole or on some segment or issue within it. And responding may be prompted by such direction as this one. One criterion for a good response here is the extent to which the test taker accurately reflects the content of the articles and some of the arguments therein. But scoring is difficult because of the subjectivity or determining an accurate reflections of the article itself. And for the reading component of this task, as well as the summary task described previously, a holistic scoring system may be feasible in this slide. And the teacher or test administration must be determined shades of gray between the point categories, but the descriptions help to bridge the gap between an empirically determined evaluation, which is impossible, and wild, impressionistic cases. Okay, the third one and the last one is note-taking and outlining. A reader's comprehension of extensive text may be assessed through an evaluation of a process of note-taking or outlining. The utility is in the strategic training that learners gain in retaining information through marginal notes that highlighted key information or organizational outlines that put supporting ideas into a visually manageable framework. So, a teacher, perhaps in one-on-one conferences with students, can use students' notes or outlines as indicators of the presence or absence of effective reading strategies and thereby point the learners in positive directions. That's all from our group. Thank you very much for your attention.